In the suffocating emerald shadows of Lubang Island, the year 1974 does not exist. For one man, the calendar is frozen, held in place by the cold steel of a rifle and the weight of an unbreakable command. We see a ghost, a relic of a dead empire. But Hiroo Onoda didn't stay because he was lost. He stayed because he was trapped in a masterpiece of psychological warfare, a semantic cage where every piece of evidence of peace was merely a sophisticated lie. He heard his mother's voice through the trees and thought it was a recording. He read newspapers about a rebuilt Japan and saw only enemy propaganda. If this dive into the limits of duty haunts you, help us reach 20,000 likes and subscribe to the channel. Now, let us step into the jungle to find the man who refused to believe the world had changed. The year is 1974, but the air in the Philippine jungle doesn't know that. It is thick, smelling of rotting vegetation and the metallic tang of rain that never truly ends. Norio Suzuki, a young traveler with shaggy hair and a restless heart, steps over a tangled root, his breath hitching in the humid heat. He thinks he is alone. He thinks he is simply searching for a legend, but from the dense screen of ferns, a pair of eyes is watching him. Eyes that haven't seen a friend in 30 years. Suddenly, the brush parts. It isn't a ghost that emerges, though he looks like one. It is a man, clad in the tattered remains of a military uniform, stitched together with bark and vine. He holds an Arisaka rifle with a steady, lethal grace. The barrel is leveled directly at Suzuki's chest. The traveler freezes, the blood draining from his face as he realizes the rumors were true. The ghost is real. He is breathing, and he is ready to kill. Suzuki raises his hands slowly, palms open, his voice trembling as he speaks the words he had practiced. "Onoda-san, the Emperor and the people of Japan are worried about you." The soldier doesn't flinch. His finger remains curled around the trigger, a slight pressure away from ending the encounter. In Onoda's mind, this boy is a plant, a scout, a lure designed to make him break cover. He stares at the stranger's modern clothes, the plastic of his gear, the soft, unscarred skin of a generation that grew up in peace. To Onoda, this isn't a rescue. It is a tactical confrontation. He stands there, a living fossil of the Second World War, weighing the life of this boy against the orders etched into his soul. For 30 years, he has treated every human contact as an ambush. Every leaflet dropped from a plane was a forgery. Every broadcast was a trick. Therefore, as he looks at Suzuki, he doesn't see a savior. He sees the latest, most sophisticated weapon of the enemy. The silence between them stretches, filled only by the rhythmic drip of water from the canopy, until finally Onoda speaks. His voice is raspy, like dry leaves scraping against stone. "I cannot leave. I am waiting for my orders." To understand why a man would spend 3 decades living like a phantom, you have to understand the day the world was stolen from him. It is late 1944. Hiroo Onoda is standing in a sterile, dimly lit room at the Futamata branch of the Nakano School, the elite breeding ground for Japanese intelligence officers. The air is frigid, smelling of floor wax and discipline. Before him stands Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, a man whose authority isn't just a rank, it is a divine mandate. Onoda feels the weight of his own shadow as the Major's eyes, cold as slate, lock onto his. Taniguchi speaks, his voice a low, rhythmic drone that vibrates in the small space. You are forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we will come back for you. These aren't just instructions, they are the walls of a psychological prison. In the culture of the Imperial Army, the greatest honor was a beautiful death, a final charge. But Taniguchi snatches that away. He tells Onoda, until then, as long as you have one soldier, you must continue to lead them. You may have to live on coconuts. If that's the case, live on coconuts. Under no circumstances are you to surrender. As Onoda listens, he isn't just hearing a military objective. He is absorbing a worldview where reality is secondary to duty. He is being trained in guerrilla warfare, yes, but he is also being trained in total skepticism. He is told that the enemy will use every trick, every lie, and every psychological lever to break him. Therefore, Onoda commits these words to memory not as a policy, but as a religious scripture. When he finally arrives on Lubang Island in December 1944, he carries this impossible order like a hidden blade. He looks at the beach, then back at the dense, impenetrable green of the jungle. He thinks to himself, I am the stay-behind. I am the pivot point upon which the empire will return. He doesn't realize that the world he is fighting for is already beginning to crumble. He doesn't know that the major who gave the order will soon return to civilian life, selling books and forgetting the ghost he created. But for Onoda, the vow is sealed. The semantic trap is set. The jungle is no longer just a place. It is a fortress of the mind where the war will never, ever end. The year is 1945, and the sky over Lubang Island is screaming. Hiroo Onoda crouches in a shallow trench, the ground shuddering beneath him as American naval shells tear through the canopy, turning ancient trees into lethal splinters. He watches the horizon, where the massive silhouettes of the Allied fleet loom like gray monsters. To any other man, this was the end. To Onoda, it was exactly what he had been trained for. He thinks, the invasion has begun. This is the test. This is where my orders become my life. As the Allied forces sweep across the island, Onoda retreats. He isn't running, he is repositioning. He takes 3 men with him, Private Akatsu, Corporal Shimada, and Private First Class Kozuka. They vanish into the interior, a world of limestone caves and razor-sharp kogan grass. They are a 4-man army against a global superpower. But then, the screaming stops. The thunder of the guns fades into a strange, unsettling silence. In August, a silence falls over the world, but inside the Lubang jungle, it sounds like a trap. A leaflet drops from the sky, drifting through the humidity like a white feather. Onoda picks it up with stained, calloused fingers. It says, "The war ended on August 15th. Come down from the mountains." He looks at the paper, then at his men. He feels a cold sneer forming in his mind. "A clumsy deception," he mutters. He explains to them that the printing is too poor, the phrasing too Western. He tells them, if the war were over, we would have been told by our officers. Therefore, this is a psychological operation to lure us out into the open so they can execute us. The 4 men stand in the humid gloom, looking at the evidence of peace and seeing only a more dangerous form of war. They watch from the ridges as American ships leave the harbor, replaced by merchant vessels. They see local villagers returning to their fields. But in Onoda's reality, these aren't civilians. They are enemy agents in disguise. Every smile from a farmer is a probe for information. Every distant radio broadcast is a coded message meant to confuse them. He leads his men deeper into the hills, moving at night, stepping only on stones to leave no tracks. They live on stolen cattle and green bananas, their stomachs perpetually cramped, their skin mapped with insect bites. The world has moved on, the empires have fallen, and the atomic age has dawned. But for Onoda, the war hasn't ended. It has simply become more intimate. He is no longer fighting a fleet, he is fighting a world that is trying to trick him into existing. To understand Hiroo Onoda's endurance, you have to understand the filter. This was the mental mechanism that allowed him to look at the truth and see a lie. In late 1945, another leaflet falls. This one is different. It bears the signature of General Tomoyuki Yamashita himself, the Tiger of Malaya, ordering all troops to surrender. Onoda holds the paper up to the dappled sunlight. He traces the characters, his mind racing. He thinks, the general is a prisoner. They forced him to write this. Or worse, the enemy has captured our printing presses and is mimicking his calligraphy. This becomes the semantic trap in its purest form. Because Major Taniguchi told him the enemy would be clever, every piece of evidence of peace becomes proof of how desperate the enemy is to catch him. To Onoda, the more convincing the evidence, the more dangerous the trap. He tells his men, listen to the logic of it. If Japan had truly lost, the emperor would have come to the radio himself and used the formal language of the court. Since we haven't heard that, the war continues. He turns his surroundings into a vast, coded message. When he finds a discarded newspaper showing a booming, neon-lit Tokyo, he doesn't see progress. He sees a puppet state. He points to a photo of a high-speed train and tells his subordinates, look at this. This is a fabrication. They want us to believe Japan is thriving so we stop fighting. But notice the shadows. They are inconsistent. This was staged in a studio in San Francisco. Even when his own family is flown over the island in a Boeing B-17, dropping personal letters and photos of his siblings, Onoda's heart remains like flint. He hears his brother's voice through a loudspeaker, echoing across the valleys. Hiroo, the war is over. Come home. Onoda crouches in the brush, his pulse drumming in his ears. He thinks, they have tortured my brother. They have forced him to read a script. Or perhaps they have found a man who sounds just like him. Every act of kindness from the outside world is filtered through this lens of suspicion. Therefore, the more the Japanese government tries to rescue him, the deeper he retreats into the caves. He is not being stubborn. He is being vigilant. He is a soldier who has been told that the ultimate weapon of the enemy is the truth. And so, he has decided that the truth is the only thing he will never believe. The 1950s and 60s are not a time of peace for Hiroo Onoda. They are a grueling 20-year siege against time itself. He is no longer part of a squad. In 1949, Private Akatsu, the man who couldn't stop looking at the leaflets, finally breaks. He slips away into the night, surrendering to the local police. For Onoda, this isn't a loss of a comrade, it's a security breach. He thinks, Akatsu has been brainwashed. He will lead them to us. We must move higher. We must be more invisible. He drives his remaining two men, Shimada and Kozuka, harder than ever. They move their camp every few days, sleeping in rain-slicked crevices, their bodies becoming lean and hard like the roots of the trees they hide among. By 1954, the world is watching the dawn of the space age, but on Lubang, the war claims another soul. During a skirmish with a local search party on the beach, Corporal Shimada is shot and killed. Onoda and Kozuka bury him in the shallow soil, not with a prayer, but with a renewed, cold fury. Onoda looks at the grave and tells Kozuka, "He died for the Emperor. We must honor him by never letting them catch us." Therefore, the two survivors become a duo of ghosts. They develop a sophisticated language of clicks and whistles to communicate through the jungle. They learn to identify the specific hum of a search plane versus a commercial airliner. The 60s pass in a blur of hunger and maintenance. Every day is a ritual of survival. They spend hours cleaning their rifles, using palm oil to keep the mechanisms from rusting in the salt air. They count their bullets like diamonds. Onoda creates a meticulous calendar by tracking the phases of the moon and the tilt of the sun, but he is off by several months. To him, the passage of time isn't a journey toward the future. It is a stay of execution. He watches from the heights as the island changes. New roads appear, more lights flicker in the valleys at night. He thinks, the enemy is expanding. The occupation is total. But as long as I am here, the Imperial Army still holds Lubang. Then, in 1972, the final blow falls. During an attempt to burn a pile of rice gathered by villagers, an act of sabotage against the enemy's supply lines, Kozuka is shot by police. Onoda watches his last friend fall. He is now alone. For 2 years, he lives in absolute silence. He speaks to no one. He is the last soldier of a war that everyone else has forgotten. He is a man with no country, no comrades, and no purpose other than the order given to him 30 years ago. He is a shadow in the jungle, waiting for a command that will never come. In the humid silence of 1974, Hiroo Onoda is a predator without a pack. He moves through the undergrowth with a ghost's grace, his senses tuned to the snap of a twig or the shift of a bird's call. Then, he finds Norio Suzuki. Suzuki is everything Onoda is not: a college dropout, a wanderer in a t-shirt, a man seeking adventure rather than victory. Suzuki had told his friends he was going to find Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman, in that order. When they finally face each other, the contrast is jarring. The soldier is a jagged edge of the past. The boy is the soft reality of the present. But Suzuki does something the Japanese government hadn't managed in decades. He listens. He doesn't come with bullhorns or police escorts. He camps in the open, waiting. When Onoda finally approaches him, rifle leveled, Suzuki doesn't run. He treats Onoda with the deference of a junior officer. They sit by a small fire, the smoke curling into the canopy, and talk for 4 nights. Suzuki tells him about the new Japan, the televisions, the skyscrapers, the neon lights of Shinjuku. Onoda listens, his face a mask of stone. He thinks, this boy is too earnest to be a liar. But he is a victim of the enemy's propaganda. He believes the war is over because he has been told nothing else. Suzuki shows him photos of his family, now elderly and gray. Onoda feels a pang of something he hasn't felt in 30 years. Grief. But he suppresses it. He looks at Suzuki and says, "I cannot believe you. Even if what you say is true, I cannot leave this post. I am a soldier. I have my orders." This is the moment the semantic trap nearly breaks. But the logic of the Nakano school holds firm. Therefore, Onoda makes a demand that he believes is impossible to meet. He tells Suzuki, "I will only surrender if my superior officer, Major Taniguchi, comes here in person and orders me to lay down my arms." He expects the boy to disappear. He expects the trick to end. He doesn't realize that Suzuki is the catalyst who will finally find the man who gave the order, now a simple bookseller, and drag the past into the present. On March 9, 1974, Hiroo Onoda stands in a small clearing, his back as straight as the barrel of his rifle. He sees a figure approaching through the trees, accompanied by Suzuki. He searches for the sharp, iron-pressed lines of the major's uniform, but he finds only a man in a rumpled civilian coat and a sensible hat. It is Yoshimi Taniguchi, the man who, 30 years ago, forbade him from dying. The major looks at Onoda, not as a legendary hero, but as a tragic mistake he had forgotten he made. The major reaches into his pocket and pulls out a stack of papers. His voice is no longer the bark of a commander. It is thin and carries the weight of a long, quiet life. He begins to read. In accordance with the Imperial Command, the 14th Area Army has ceased all combat operations. As the words hang in the humid air, Onoda feels a sudden, violent shift in the world. The semantic trap doesn't just snap shut, it vanishes. He thinks, it wasn't a trick. The leaflets weren't forgeries. The radio broadcasts were real. The world didn't move on to deceive me. It moved on because I was no longer a part of it. A hollow coldness spreads from his chest to his fingertips. He realizes that the 3 decades he spent killing enemy cattle and hiding in strategic caves were not a campaign. They were a vacuum. He looks at his Arisaka rifle, the wood polished to a mirror finish by his own hands, and it feels like a lead weight. He steps forward, his movements mechanical, and presents his sword to the major. He bows low, his forehead nearly touching the jungle floor. In his mind, he is screaming. He thinks, what was it all for? If the war ended in 1945, then Shimada and Kozuka didn't die for the emperor. They died for a ghost. I have spent 30 years guarding a grave. He hands over his weapon, and with it, the only version of himself he knows how to be. Hiroo Onoda returned to a Japan he didn't recognize. The air was thick with smog, but to him, it smelled like defeat. He stood on the tarmac, saluting a flag that now stood for commerce instead of conquest. He looked at the crowds and thought, they are smiling, but they have no center. They have forgotten the weight of a rifle. He was a symbol of lost virtue, but he had traded his youth for a semantic shadow. He tried to live in this new world, but the noise of the television felt like enemy static. Therefore, he eventually fled again, not to the jungle, but to the plains of Brazil, seeking a silence that didn't demand his surrender. We look at Onoda and see incredible will, but the tragedy isn't that he stayed. It's that he was right to stay within the logic he was given. His story is a bridge of shared humanity, a reminder that we all live in cages built by the words of those we trust. It is the heartbreaking beauty of a heart that refused to break, even when the world it loved had long since turned to dust.